The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and good afternoon to everyone from coast to coast. Welcome to today's webinar, Facilities and Services Invoice Workflow Project at the University of Toronto. My name is David Elliott and I'm the Professional Development Coordinator at CABO. I'll be hosting today's webinar. The webinar is being delivered by two CABO members from the University of Toronto, Ron Swale, Chief Operating Officer, Operations Officer, Property Services and Sustainability, and Daryl Fernandopoli, Director, Financial Services, Facilities and Services. Before we start, just want to orient everyone to the screen. The red box with the white arrow inside it will expand or collapse your control panel. Inside the control panel, you will see a question pane to use. We encourage you to submit questions throughout using the GoToWebinar controls. The presenters will attempt to address all questions during the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the CABO website. Now I'd like to welcome our presenters, Ron and Daryl.
Thank you very much, David. Daryl and I are extremely pleased to be able to share our experience in improving our accounts payable operation. We're hoping to have lots of time to respond to questions as we go through the webinar, so please feel free to send in your questions. So by way of feedback, introduction, the St. George campus is an extremely large, complex, and research-intensive campus. My department provides operational services to the campus community on a daily basis, as well as long-term stewardship of the physical assets over time. By daily population, the St. George campus alone would rank as one of the largest, 75th largest cities in Canada. The facilities and services budget is significant. In net dollars, it's close to $120 million annually, and it's split into three distinct areas: our district energy system and utilities procurement portion, deferred maintenance, and our campus operations and services. Now, having accessible, timely, and accurate financial information is critical to efficient, effective, and transparent organization. A decade ago, our financial information could not be described as accurate, timely, or accessible. Paper ruled. With a budget of over $100 million annually, it was difficult to know where we stood at any given time in relation to our budget or where our money was being spent. We needed to change. We were in a climate of financial constraint, which we are still in. We needed to accomplish much more with less resources as the university grew. Our accounts payable, like many other processes and facilities and services at that time, were completely paper-driven. Staff were busy working, but they weren't effective. We were routinely duplicating effort across a very large number of people, and we didn't know where payments were in relation to contractors. Our contractors and suppliers were being frustrated with our lack of timely payment and being able to tell them where we were, and our staff were not being accountable. We needed staff to undertake value-added work and create a system that facilitated accountability, speed, and provided upper management with key, accurate financial information. Historically, it was very difficult for staff to provide information for us in our old system, and when we did get the information, it took an absorbent amount of time. So it was really a challenging thing just to get high-level information, let alone trying to get into some of the more granular information that I required. Facilities and services departments in general live and die based on the commitment of third-party suppliers and contractors. They're really a fundamental part of what we do. We expect them to jump through hoops, meet unreasonable timelines, provide us with great value for money, and attend situations that happen after hours and on weekends. A critical part of this business relationship is paying contractors and suppliers on a timely basis. And additionally, we want to take advantage of any discounts we could get or avoid penalties. So before I pass it over to Daryl, are there any questions? You see any questions? Okay. Oh, oh, sorry. I think we're getting a
we've got a technical
problem.
issue here.
Our slides aren't moving.
Bear with us for a second here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Right, space bar.
We're back. Excellent. So now that's okay. No problem. We'll pass it over to Daryl now.
Thank you, Ron. As Ron mentioned, it was quite clear that we needed to revamp our accounts payable processes. So in 2012, after consulting various stakeholders and subject matter experts, we developed a very comprehensive business specifications document. As you know, we are governed by the broader public sector procurement rules, and so in 2013 January, we floated a public tender on MERCs. In April 2013, after a thorough evaluation, we compiled a short list of potential proponents. We invited them over to Toronto for interviews, and we had to seek detailed clarification on their RFP responses. Our evaluation team comprised of subject matter experts and key contacts from our client departments. We wanted to make sure that we brought in our client department contacts as well, so that in the long run, they are part of this solution. In October 2013, after a long series of discussions, we finalized the statement of work with the successful vendor. Thereafter, we did our obvious reference checks, and the contract was awarded to the successful bidder. And in this case, it was Dolphin Enterprise Solutions. In December 2013, we conducted a 4-day comprehensive fact-finding workshop in Toronto, and we were pleased to see Dolphin's A-team, if you will, come down to Toronto and spend the 4 days with us, getting all the details of how we operate, the university culture, the compliance requirements, and what kind of solution they were working towards. In August 2014, we are pleased to inform you that we went live, and it's been over 2 years now since we rolled the system out, and it's working very, very well, I should say. The next two slides really address how we evaluated the software and also how we evaluated prospective vendors. On the software side, we wanted to make sure that the software solution aligned perfectly with the university's SAP enterprise system. Therefore, seamless integration with SAP along with the web approvals were mandatory requirements. The solution had to be scalable and support multiple invoice approval scenarios. For example, we have non-PO invoices, PO invoices, and utility invoices. And each of these types of invoices has their own nuances with respect to how we process them in the system. The system had to be user-friendly and sustainable for us to manage, administer, upgrade, and support the system in the long run. It had to be configurable by us, so we did not want to have to go to the vendor each time there was a change. If someone was to join or leave the department, for example, or if we wanted to make changes to the approval tables or the thresholds, we did not have to resort to going back to the vendor to make those changes. We wanted the control within ourselves so that we could manage that process and obviously reduce costs as well. Real-time data and documentation from SAP was paramount to us. We wanted to make sure that there was instant validation within SAP. So if someone was to enter, for example, a cost center number, there would be a real-time validation of that information. we wanted to seamlessly toggle between SAP and the application. So if you were in the application and you wanted to check, for example, a purchase order, to go into the purchase order right away and not even realize that you are left the application and that you are in SAP. So we did achieve that through this solution. The application had to be innovative yet flexible in order to accommodate our unique business process. So basically, we had our own business processes, and we wanted to make sure that there was flexibility in the system that would accommodate these processes. In terms of vendor evaluation, one could easily argue that this evaluation is absolutely critical to the successful implementation of any system. They had to have in-depth experience, both in terms of integration and alignment. The vendor had to demonstrate that they were receptive to certain amounts of customization to meet our unique goals. And of course, we wanted a vendor who had a proven track record in this field. So we were looking for a vendor who was very professional in their approach and who could answer our specific questions. You can appreciate with the detailed business specs we had, there were lots of questions that we needed answered. We appreciated the vendor's frankness in terms of what their solution could offer vis-a-vis our extremely detailed business specs. And we also liked the fact that they were not afraid to recommend alternate best practices based on their experiences in the past. So that was very good, because most often, we all think that, what we're doing is the best way to do it. But when you get a third party in, a consultant or a vendor who's had this experience, they greater feedback and also at times make us rethink our processes, and certainly we benefited from their experience in this regard. Solid references was obviously a crucial requirement, and they panned out very well. Finally, we recognized and appreciated the vendor's collaborative approach and mutual desire to develop a successful solution. So this was very evident the time they were awarded the contract. It was quite evident that they wanted to work with us. They were equally invested in the project success, and they too wanted to use this project maybe as a shining example for them down the road. So it was mutually beneficial to both of us. Before I move on, are there any questions? I don't see anything here, right? Nothing on the chat line? No? Okay, so we'll move on. We move on to some information on facilities and services itself. Basically, the department has 3 distinct AP invoice processing models within the overall structure. So as you can see there, they use the building operations and maintenance services, which primarily have very large number of invoices, small value for the most part, and it can have a combination of PO and non-PO invoices. Then we have utilities, which again has a high volume of invoices. They're all non-PO invoices, of course, but a small number of vendors, so hydro, water, gas, steam, and so on. And they are extremely time sensitive because they have to be paid promptly, if not it will attract late payment charges. And then we have trades, which is another distinct category of invoices, which has a combination of what we call PO invoices and non-PO invoices. Because the trades is responsible for the inventory system, we conduct those invoices through a 3-way invoice process. And they are very small value, high volume invoices. Generally speaking, given the size, scope, age, and diverse use of our buildings, the Facilities and Services Department is extremely busy and a dynamic unit. As such, we do our share of reactive emergency work that requires immediate action. For example, we may have to deal with critical issues such as a flood. So we deal with the flood first and then deal with the paperwork subsequently. Therefore, any new system introduced would have to satisfy competing priorities, i.e. the flexibility to accommodate the realistic business operation, as well as to ensure that internal controls are not compromised. So that was very important to us. At a minimum, all invoices require a recommender and at least one approver. So the new system had to complement the numerous sub-business units. We have approximately 30 sub-business units, each with its own independent operating style. And they would have their differing rules, approvers, approval levels, and so on. For example, utilities would have a different approval threshold compared to a non-utilities invoice. So the same individual who signs the utilities invoice will sign for a higher value, and if he's signing for an operating budget invoice, it will be for a lower value. So it was not straightforward, obviously, but these were our business requirements, and we were striving to have them satisfied. Some information on the accounts payable department specifically. We have the equivalent of 3 AP processing staff, and there are approximately 120 approvers across the facilities and services department who are in some way, shape, or form involved with the invoice approval process. So they could be recommenders, they could forward invoices, or they could approve invoices. We process over 25,000 invoices per year. Actually, now that we have a very accurate count, we can say it's closer to 30,000. Now we are bordering on 30,000 invoices a year. And as you can see, a majority of these invoices are non-PO invoices. About 80% are non-PO invoices. We do have a large volume of monthly utility invoices, and these are basically for hydro, gas, water, steam, spanning over 120 buildings. Prior to the introduction of the new system, we did not track the consumption data in SAP, but instead staff were manually updating Excel spreadsheets for each utility type against each meter number. But more on this later.
And that infused a lot of error too.
Oh yes, absolutely, because you can imagine entering all this consumption data, meter reading, and so on, manually on the spreadsheets, and so you'll see date errors, volume errors, and so on. But I'll speak to that a little bit later. What you see here is a very highly simplistic overview of the invoice workflow process. So essentially, what happens here is invoices come into a central hub in accounts payable. It could come in by mail, fax, or email. And then the AP staff would scan the invoices and validate the invoices. Now, the beauty of the invoices that come in via email is that staff did not have to scan the invoice, because the advanced technology we used would sort of pretty much absorb this invoice attachment from the email and do the scanning automatically. So that saved us a lot of time. Once the invoice is validated, it's sent across by the AP staff on its merry way into the workflow, and basically it would go to a recommender or directly to an approver. In the case of utility invoices, it would go direct to an approver, and so the AP staff would not have to start the workflow. Workflow would start directly from the validation stage after scanning. Once the recommender approves it, it basically gets posted in SAP if all the criteria has been met, the predetermined criteria has been met. It will get posted in SAP directly without having to come back to the accounts payable staff to do that function. So it's highly streamlined, and of course it can get more complicated if there are exceptions and so on. But what you see here in this flowchart is a very simplistic view, which works or which functions 90% of the time on the invoices we process. In terms of configuration of the business rules, we had 3 choices for the routing of invoices. Basically, we could bypass AP and route the invoice directly to the recommender. So we do this in the case of utilities invoices by using what is known as a pay within range auto route feature. What this does is we have a table in the background that has the utility type of utility, the meter number, and based on that, it identifies who should get that invoice for recommending. So the moment the AP staff scan the invoice goes directly to that recommender without the AP staff having to start that workflow altogether once again. So that's a huge feature which expedites the payment of utilities. And we're happy to note that we have not attracted any late payment charges since we implemented the system. There's a second option in terms of routing an invoice, and that is known as the no-touch posting. Essentially what that does is it sends an invoice. If it's a PO invoice, it could go potentially directly to SAP for processing. We at U of T and at Facilities and Services did not use this option because for internal control purposes, we wanted to make sure that the people who are involved with that purchase order and invoice were touching that invoice to recommend and approve if everything was delivered or serviced as expected. So we bypassed that option of a no-touch posting. The third option, and which is what we use most of the time except for utility invoices, is the routing of invoices to AP staff who will look at the invoice and then determine which department the invoice belongs to, and then they would send it across for approval. Once the department is identified, the system would know exactly who should get the invoice and who should approve the invoice from that point on, depending on the invoice's dollar amount. So there is no bypassing any rules or anything like that, because the moment a recommender clicked on recommend, the system would automatically go to the next level to the approver. And the moment that approver clicked on approve, depending on the dollar amount of the invoice, the system would escalate, the invoice would escalate to the next level, and so on. Until the final level is reached, once it's satisfied, it would post to SAP directly, like I said, without going back to AP staff. So the AP staff involvement was minimized. There was more time for the recommender and the approver to look at the invoice and to make sure that what they were paying was valid, accurate, and legit. Next, we will discuss in more detail about the benefits of the system. I want to emphasize that the value of the system goes way beyond scanning and simply moving an invoice from person A to B. We adopted advanced OCR, which is basically optical character recognition software capabilities that essentially auto-populated over 90% of the required fields. So we have the screen with the fields that are required for the invoice to move along and get processed in SAP. And what this optical character recognition software did during the scanning stage was to capture, to identify from the invoice where these fields were, and then populate those fields with the data from the invoice. It's quite cool and amazing when you look at how it operates. And it's almost 100%. I said 90% here to be conservative, but it's almost 100% that we that captures from the scanning process. So as you can imagine, the staff time eliminating mundane manual data entry work is totally eliminated. Not to mention the key punch errors that come with that. The system, another main benefit of the system is helping with audit requests. We have large batches of invoices, copies that can be retrieved within seconds. So very often we'll get the auditors, or the ministry's auditors on FRP invoices requesting copies of invoices, and usually these might span like a full year's invoices for a particular vendor, for example. We can retrieve these from the system within seconds and zip the file and just email it to the auditors. Whereas in the past, staff would go to the archives, spend countless hours, looking for these invoices, going through filing cabinets, and then eventually responding to the requests. Similarly, at year end, when it comes to accrual valuation, I mean, it's a breeze. I've gone through, I think, 2 year-end cycles with this system, and it's been a breeze for us to identify exactly where we are in terms of the accruals, because you can, within seconds, identify the total value of invoices out there in circulation in the system at any given time. So even on the day we close the books, in the morning I know what our accruals is, and at the time of closing I know what the accrual valuation is.
In the past, that was a really difficult process.
Absolutely. I mean, just to give you some context, in the past, staff would log these invoices towards year end, and essentially when the invoice is sent out, they'll log it on a spreadsheet. When it comes back, they'll take it off the spreadsheet, and that's how we arrived at our valuation. It sounds simple, but you can appreciate when you're dealing with over 25,000 invoices a year. You start this exercise around March, because our year end is April, and it's such a tedious job. It adds very little value to the process, and it diverts staff time from actually processing the invoices, which is their core function and primary responsibility. More key benefits. I mean, there is complete transparency in the system. Our customers can see exactly how much they were charged. They can view the invoice copy, and they're all happy because they can see there's no markups. The invoice is visible to them, and that's what they've been charged as well. So it's seamless. It's extremely transparent. In terms of accountability, there is email notifications that the approvers receive. If you get an invoice today at 11 p.m. in the night, you'll get an email stating that you have invoices for approval. And then we've built in some controls with respect to reminders. So there are reminders. If it's operating invoice every 5 days, business days, you'll get a reminder if you haven't dealt with it. And if it's a utility invoice every 3 days because of the urgency involved, there'll be a reminder that you have to deal with this invoice. And we've also built in escalations where required. There is a detailed audit history. I mean, now there is no denying when an invoice was received by a staff person. In the past, invoices don't get paid. A vendor would call and I'm not picking on property managers here, but just as an example.
Yes, you are.
Well, they deserve it sometimes. But they would come and they would put the blame on the accounting staff, saying that they have been sitting on an invoice and not processing the payment. Because these were not logged, it was very hard to prove exactly when it was approved and who was to blame and so on. The system now is very clear. It has a detailed audit history to the second as to when you got it, when you held on to it, when you approved it, and when it went to the next stage and so on. So it's very seamless, and the staff are extremely happy because it protects them now from these kind of allegations.
Right, and I think there's much more collegiality and far fewer complaints about your department now. I mean, they just don't happen anymore.
Exactly. I mean, earlier the complaints were huge, and now it's a lot less. There's hardly anything because, it's working. The system is working, simply put. And also it has the increased accountability basically results in faster payment cycles, and it has improved our vendor relations with all our vendors. I mean, they're happy they're getting paid on time, as they should, and we are happy because we have less calls, because it's only when they don't get paid that they call. So now staff are fielding less calls, and they're doing more value-added forensic work as opposed to, fielding calls or looking at filing cabinets and so on. Improving internal controls and reducing risk were key elements of the project. So the system actually has an advanced method of identifying potential duplicates. So you can identify a duplicate either within the system or a duplicate that exists in SAP, and it will direct us to that record so that we can verify and see whether in fact it is a duplicate or it's just the invoice. The vendor has used the same invoice number, for example, over again. We have established approval levels which cannot be bypassed. So these are set in stone. Only a system administrator with the approval of senior management can change these levels, approval levels. A manager would have a certain limit, a director would have a certain limit, and so on. And these approval tables are controlled for each business unit. So each business unit will have their own approval levels. In terms of delegation of authority and assigning substitutes, we have also built in some controls there so that, when I'm going on vacation, for example, if I'm going for multiple weeks, I can assign, my finance manager for week 1 and my IT manager for week 2. And also, the control is that I just cannot assign anyone within my department, but only certain people at certain levels within the department. So that brings in another layer of internal controls, which we wouldn't have in the past. I mean, some of these features were so good, in my view anyway, that they were subsequently adopted by the vendor as part of their standard platform now. I recall when we were discussing the statement of work with the vendors, they were saying, why do you want these sort of rules? Because they were not familiar with these issues. And now they've sort of, they've bought in big time, and they've used it as part of their standard platform. So that's a good feeling for us.
So another Another key benefit of the system relates to sustainability. We've realized significant paper savings, both on the originals that used to be sent in, but also on photocopying. And we've also, through this, had the opportunity to eliminate a significant amount of filing cabinets that used to take up space. So we're no longer housing literally tons of paper on our floor. We're using our floor for office space and more productive use. The other benefit, sustainable benefit of the system is it's facilitated expansion of our work from home program. In the past, one of the, when we talked about expanding the system, one of the concerns was the fact that staff, would have to take paper copies home and they might lose it. So that's been eliminated. That fear of it, because it's all electronic, we have no fear of that. The system's tracking ability ensures that, we know what a reasonable day's work is, and so we can monitor that, and the staff know we can monitor that when they're working from home. So there's no misunderstandings between staff working from home. It's been extremely well received by staff, and staff morale, every staff member who could take advantage of working from home is taking advantage of it, and so staff morale has definitely improved as a result of the system.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the accounts department right now is the envy of the rest of the facilities and services departments, because not only because of their efficiency, but because of the fact that they can work from home, which is, obviously a key benefit to staff as well. In terms of reports, the solution comes with some really cool, great canned reports. I mean, we can identify the status of an invoice at any given time. There is a info center which shows you the in-flight invoices, where it is, with whom it is, and so on. And like I mentioned previously, I mean, the fact that staff can, identify where an invoice is, and also the approvers can identify where an invoice is. There is less interaction in terms of, coming with queries, but instead the approvers can right away deal with the vendor query and let them know, you got paid on such a day, you cash a check on such a day, or, the invoice is with my boss right now, I will follow up, and so on.
So we see a question about, sorry to interrupt there, but change management. We will be addressing change management issues later in the presentations, very soon, actually.
In fact, some of our vocal opponents to change, dropped by the office, and after a few months of implementation, said that how happy they were with the system. So to me, that was quite gratifying, because they were quite vocal during the training session stage. Probably because there was more accountability and transparency, but I think that quickly was overshadowed with the benefits the system brought over to them. So that was good to hear from them, as to how the system was working and that they liked it. We also developed some key customized reports to meet with our specific needs. So what you see here is a dashboard that gives you a very comprehensive real-time overview of the state of the AP world, if you will. Just to go over that quickly, the top left quadrant is all the invoices in flight right now. So it's a bit small on your screen probably. There is about 200 invoices with AP staff right now that needs to go out in the workflow. The big orange bar you see there is the number of invoices at that moment that were in circulation with various recommenders and approvers. So that's a very good snapshot of how many invoices are out there, and for me, how many invoices are with the AP staff. That's the yellow box there, the first one, and that's useful information, obviously. On the top right quadrant, you see two bars there, the yellow and the blue, I believe. The yellow bar signifies this is for the last 3 weeks. So it's a 3-week data, and it shows you the invoices that came via email, which is the yellow bar, and the ones that came through the regular, snail mail, and that's the blue bar. As you can see, the yellow bar is, sometimes dwarfing the blue bar there. So this is an interesting trend, because when we started the system, before we started the system, we used to have about 20% of invoices coming to a dedicated AP email address. Now what we're finding is about 60 to 65% are coming via email, and the balance 35 to 40 is through regular mail.
That saves time.
That saves a lot of time because, like I mentioned before, the ones that come via email do not have to be manually scanned. So that's a great saving. And it helps the vendors too because they have an electronic record that they email that invoice as opposed to just sending out an invoice. The bottom left quadrant is basically sort of a life to date, if you will, from the time we started the project in August, rolled it out. This is the sort of historical information relating to how many invoices we processed. The huge gray bar there is how many invoices have been cashed since we started.
Over 53,000.
Yes, exactly. So that's over 53,000 in 2 years. And then the bottom right is again over the last 1 year period, a quick pie chart of exactly how many invoices the yellow ones will receive via email, and the green ones are the ones that came through regular mail. If you do the math, you'll see it's about 62% or so. The utility consumption report, this one you see here is a customized report. It basically leverages the Kofax optical character recognition technology, the OCR technology I mentioned, to capture the statistical data that is there in an invoice. So there is the meter readings, the reading dates from to, meter numbers, consumption, and so on that is captured, and it automatically populates this report, and it helps us with our utilities forecasting. Again, as I mentioned previously, in the past, staff used to manually enter these on spreadsheets, so you can appreciate the tremendous time and effort saved as a result. Great. I'll pass it on to Ron.
Thank you, Daryl. So here's an example of some of the queries that we can do with the system, and in this particular one, we're looking at a specific company and how that company is being used across users of the system. So that's effective in seeing, how many, how important a vendor is to our operations. So we can look at different companies, see which ones aren't being used, and call the ones that aren't being used, and bring in new contractors to ensure that we're getting competitive bids. The other positive thing is the inverse. We could look at Joe Smith specifically and see how he's spending, and see, is that spend too focused on one or two contractors. So it's really a very powerful system from an oversight point of view. So this system is really, because of the exposure of something like today, our award is really being considered more broadly. And it's funny, it's picking up steam now that we actually have got some outside recognition. Facilities and Services isn't usually the department that sets a new standard for the university in as far as finance, but this is certainly one of those, and it's certainly looking like it'll be utilized across a far broader spectrum of the university. This solution is highly transferable to other departments or campuses, and it's, as we've indicated, it's extremely powerful software. It's eliminating a lot of busy work, data entry, phone calls, photocopying, day stamping, and filing. I mean, the day stamp is one that used to drive me absolutely crazy. That's not value-added work. It provides the opportunity for detailed data mining and easily provides high-level information right down from the top down to the individual level. So what's not to like about the system? Improved speed, improved accuracy, throughput, ensuring compliance with signing limits, real-time information, and it assures that the staff are accountable. I can give you one example. There was an individual who was, eventually I got a complaint from a contractor, and when we looked into it, an individual was looking or holding on to close to $1 million of invoices because he was not happy with the contractor, and how he was dealing with that was just sitting on the invoice, and that's really not how I want my staff to interact with suppliers and contractors. If you have an issue, deal with it, but you don't passive-aggressively sit on an invoice for an extended period of time. I think it was months. Now staff are accountable. People who are providing, are tendering and awarding work and overseeing work do have to pay the contractors on a reasonable time frame. And if there's an issue, deal with that.
Yes, and I mean, in that scenario you explained, Ron, in the past, the blame would have come onto the accounts payable finance staff for not paying it on time. So anyway, going back to key success factors and lessons learned, it seems and sounds simplistic, but this was by far not an easy project. It had unprecedented detailed business specifications that had to be written, and we had many UFT stakeholders and partners involved. So we had internal audit, Center Financial Services, Center Procurement Services, and the IT unit. And each of these, partners and stakeholders had, their own reservations at times and challenges. Keep in mind, this was cutting edge to the university at the time, or still is. And some of us like the same old, and this certainly wasn't the case.
I think one thing I'd mention, there was particularly, I think, not to blame one group, but IT continually tried to get us to compromise on what we wanted. And I would emphasize to people, don't compromise. They wanted to phase in the solution. If you phase in a solution, sometimes you never get to actually what you wanted. So we were extremely knew what we wanted. We stuck by it, even though repeatedly people tried to pull us back. And that's definitely something I would emphasize to people, don't compromise. As far as change management, that's what people have talked about. We're talking about more than 120 people who had control over different invoices, and that was a challenge, getting people's buy-in. Certainly, people felt like Big Brother was watching them, and when they were losing control. But through discussions and through time and through practice and the actual execution, people did. Some of the most vehement critics actually understood that this was going to save them time and actually improve their job. So
true, and I mean, if I might add to that, besides the 120 approvers, I mean, internally within the accounts payable staff, that was a huge challenge as well. And this is no exaggeration, but collectively, the 3 to 4 staff who handle accounts payable duties, had over 100 years of collective experience processing invoices in a same old-fashioned way. So you can appreciate the hurdle and the challenge that we were faced with to get them on board. And one of the things we did, and you have a question here, I believe, on change management. One of the things we did was to make sure that the AP staff were involved right from the beginning, made them partners, part of the solution as opposed to the problem, and get their involvement and buy-in. Definitely, once they started to realize the advantages of the system, you could see the momentum shift, in terms of the buy-in, and it certainly made my change management process a lot easier. And again, as Ron mentioned, you got to be open and flexible with what you need, but at the same time, do not compromise on your main goals. Other lessons learned, set up regular milestones. Of course, you want to make sure that you're on track, have a good project management team, engage your stakeholders, include subject matter experts and key clients in requirements gathering. So you make sure that you have the right people in the room when you're doing your requirements gathering phase. You communicate and inform the team. Keep constant communication lines open. Inform them as to where things are going, and so that they know that it is progressing. The project is not dead in the water. Provide training early. We made sure we provided training early to staff, gave them documentation as well, and we did not walk away after we went live. We made sure we walked the halls, we interacted with the approvers, and we ensured that we were there to answer their specific questions. We highlight the fact that they will be transforming themselves into knowledge workers, engage in value-added work, doing more meaningful tasks. So that was very important as well.
So let's face it, the finance departments don't get a lot of positive profile, and often quite the reverse. This team, once convinced the solution was going to improve their operations, worked extremely hard to make this successful. And the group is extremely proud of being recognized through Cabo, and that Cabo plaque sits in our lobby, and that's our staff walk by it every day, as do our visitors to our floor.
And speaking of celebrating successes with staff, we have proudly mounted this infographic on a wall where the AP staff operate. It is a great tool. It gives you a very quick snapshot about the project, the savings, how many invoices we process, the OCR technology, and it's a good project recap. And it's also not a very subtle reinforcement of the significant benefits of the project. It cultivates a shared sense of pride in our collective success. I will now pass it on to Ron again to speak about plans. Before I pass it on to Ron, sorry, there is a question here, and that is, does the system connect to a work order system for building operations, maintenance, and services, so you can reference a work order and know which AP vendor did the work? Is that what SAP is? So sorry, I should have probably at the onset explained what SAP is. That's our enterprise software. It's one of the largest software enterprise software systems in the world. It's a German product. I believe it stands for Systems, Applications, and Processes. I believe U of T is the only university in Canada that uses SAP, but there are lots of organizations within Canada that use this software. And no, the system does not, this particular accounts payable invoice workflow system does not integrate with a work order to determine whom the invoice should go to. But we do know, we have informed our vendors that they should indicate who their contact is at the university so that we can then route it very quickly to the correct person. I hope that answers that question.
And if not, ask another.
Yeah.
So where are we going? So key for us to do more with less is leveraging technology to improve productivity and automation. And this is a great example of how we've been able to harness technology to improve our productivity. Our ability to better manage our extremely large budget has been greatly improved by this technology, resulting in much more consistent year-end bottom lines that Daryl indicated before, and much more confidence from senior management in our ability to control our budget. We have plans now underway to roll it out to other departments at the university. So with that, we're happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. Yes, we've got a couple minutes left, everyone. There's no other questions in the queue at the moment, but please feel free to send something in if you have it. I think the change management piece, you touched on that a tiny bit. I'm just wondering if you wanted to comment any more on that. So you said really people did come around when they started to see the results, and you getting feedback on that, and that's you can ask for a better sign. What were some of the things you were facing up front and beforehand, aside from designing a great solution and implementing it successfully? How are you handling some of the naysayers as you were working towards that?
There were.
Oh yeah, for sure there were.
Being extremely determined on what we thought the long-term vision was. I mean, Daryl had to do a lot of work with his staff, who are very experienced and we're very comfortable in what they're doing. But when you do talk about the potentials of this system, staff could see that this was actually going to protect them. It was going to eliminate some things they didn't like doing, dealing with contractors, angry calls. So initially I think it was difficult, but they came around fairly quickly when they saw the benefits of this, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously change management is harder during the implementation phase because, the proof is in the pudding, right? So as a result of that, what I wanted to focus on was to, emphasize on the benefits of the proposed system. So, we paid a lot of attention to the benefits. We compared the old versus the new. We brought in the stakeholders at the requirements phase as well. that was important because the more people we got involved, then there was the chances of the opposition was much less. Then again, at the testing phase, we brought in the stakeholders from various departments to do testing as well along with us, so that the scripts were tested jointly, and that helped as well. And then making sure that there is adequate training material and training provided, making sure that this is not, like Ron mentioned, a Big Brother initiative. It was to improve processes, to do value-added work and make things efficient for everybody. And once we implemented, I mean, with my staff, I could say very clearly, once we implemented, they saw the benefits very quickly. And I'm proud of my staff for adapting to this and being receptive so quickly, which I did not expect, but it was a very pleasant and a very appreciated, response I received from them. They clearly, I mean, nobody wants to bend in two and put invoices in filing cabinets and spend their time doing that kind of work these days. So they do see the benefits of this.
And the other thing I would mention, having a work from home program as a carrot at the end. I don't know anybody who, it's hard to know if anybody works from home a couple days a week. It's a very positive experience for most people. So that was also another way through the change management. They saw that as a huge benefit to them and helped them get on board. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And just to continue on that, I think often people, when they're hearing about an efficiency program, they're worried about job cuts. And you talked about how you shifted people to more value-added roles. Was that communicated up front, or were you anticipating to find some staff savings too? Or can you just comment on that a bit?
Absolutely, I'll take that one, and that's a very good question. That was one of the first things we did, was to make sure that staff understood that this wasn't a job cutting or cost cutting exercise. So we had to make sure that they were comfortable with that, and it certainly wasn't a job cutting exercise. It was really to realign what they did, to make it more value added, and to keep in mind that we had this number of staff when we were doing 15,000 invoices, and we have the same number of staff and we're doing 28,000 now. So it's doing more with less, if you will. But certainly it wasn't intended as a job cutting exercise, and we did spend a considerable amount of time educating the staff and making sure that those fears, which were well founded, were put to bed.
Great.
So that is a great question. Yes.
And we've got a couple other questions have come in. So one is, can you provide the approximate cost of the system? I don't know if you can share that or want to share that.
I'm afraid I couldn't go into specifics on that one. I mean, it was a few $100,000, I would say, broadly speaking. But what I can say is it was well worth our effort and money. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very quick ROI. Yeah.
Yes.
Very quick.
Yeah, a year and a half or 2 years, you're ahead already. So yeah. Someone's asking a technical question. What OCR, the optical character recognition system, do you use?
Right. We used Kofax, a software system called Kofax, and again, we were told it has about a 70 to 80% success rate, and by success rate I mean it can capture various fields that need to be populated. But we are quite very pleasantly surprised that it's doing almost 90 to 100% of the capture. So it's great. It's Kofax, and it integrates well with the application, and it's quite seamless.
Okay. And there's another question here. It says, how do you manage purchase card transactions?
Okay, so the purchase card transactions are not part of this process. They are just handled manually, when we get the invoice. This is strictly to deal with, I would say, 98% of our invoices, which are basically utilities invoices and the PO and non-PO invoices through vendors. The P-card transactions are just handled manually, same with expense reimbursements. Those have not been ported here at the moment.
Okay. And just to make a plug for our next webinar, I think it's October 21st, McMaster is actually going to be talking about a P-card system on their campus. So it might have some information for that person who asked that question. I've got another question here, and they're asking again, what's the name of the OCR? So it's Kofax?
Kofax? Yeah, KOFAX.
Okay, let me just write that down in the chat. So KOFAX.
Right.
There we go. There we go. I think, let's see if there are any other questions. No, nothing else there.
And just so you know, I mean, we use just one scanner actually. So all this work with one small powerful scanner. So it's not like you need like massive hardware or something like that to operate this. It's
Good.
just a Fujitsu scanner.
Mm-hmm. Here we go. There's another question that's come in. How do you handle construction holdbacks?
Good question.
That is a very good question. So that is done manually at the time of validating the invoice. So the holdbacks, where it is identified in the invoice, it's held back and then it's passed on. And then once the financial accounting kicks in, it's charged to two different accounts, one to the operating account and one to the holdbacks account at that time.
Here, another question just from me, kind of stimulated from a discussion I was having yesterday with some people. How does your audit department like this or integrate with this? And I would assume they would find this pretty useful, the way the information is now managed.
Initially not so good, but right now it's pretty good. I mean, initially yes, there were reservations. Of course. We were doing a lot of things differently in this. We were moving from what we call three-way PO invoices to two-way PO invoices, which was novel to the university. We were digitizing everything, which was kind of novel to the university. We were approving through workflow as opposed to manual signatures, which was also novel to the university. So we were doing a lot of things that were new, and obviously you can expect certain amount of resistance and reservations. But having said that, I mean, now when audit has a query, or firstly there is total transparency and visibility, so they can see exactly who approved what, why. Otherwise, you've got to try and identify a manual signature. You could say it's anybody's.
We had an example where they wanted multi-year look back, and we could, Daryl supplied 2 years of look back in 5 seconds, and the rest took weeks. So audit did see the advantage of not only us being able to get that information quickly, but the fact that we could slice and dice it very easily.
True.
So now they're much more supportive.
Good. So another question's come in, and they're saying, did you have to get certified for CRA or granting agencies? I guess get approval with CRA and granting agencies to go paperless.
No, we did not have to go get approval from them, and in fact, some of our auditors are, government auditors who, administer the facilities renewal program, FRP funds, and so those are ministry auditors, and we provide backup from the system whenever there's a query, and that's being accepted. So, I mean, the world is changing, right? Things have moved on, and so now, there's lots of places where, there's digitized material that's being used, and as long as your systems are bulletproof, we shouldn't have to worry about it. It's thinking out of the box here, and then, moving forward.
Great. I don't see any other questions there, so I think we can start to wrap up. Definitely want to say thank you very much to Ron and Daryl for today's webinar. That was fantastic and great to see all the questions come in, everyone. Thank you for the participation. Just promote some other upcoming CABO events. You can visit our website there. We've got another webinar coming up that I mentioned in October. We've got our online courses started and some other things going on, and there's a workshop in November on responding to divestment campaigns, which is a big issue in our sector right now. So please take a look at that and join in on the items that interest you. And thanks again for your participation, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.